Good morning. I have straight at 10 o'clock. So we are going to go ahead and get started. Let me start by introducing myself. My name is Missy Wally, and I am with the Department of Ed, the Director of Special Projects, and I get a great opportunity to work with these administrators throughout the state on professional learning communities and also high reliability schools. So thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us. And I see essential standards as a hot topic because that's one that I probably get asked about most. So the information that they're going to share with you today is going to be great information, and I look forward to hearing it as well. So I have pretty much our topic is essential standards, but I hope you notice that it says it can lead to a guaranteed and viable curriculum. It doesn't say it will lead. It's one of the steps. There's a lot of steps in the PLC process. And the PLC process is just common sense. I mean, it is a process. It's not a program. It is common sense, but it's hard work. So just know going into the work that it is hard work. The essential standards is not something that's a one and done, and they'll talk about this a little bit more throughout their presentation, but it's not something you decide and you go, hey, here's our essential standards. We don't have to look at that again. What's the next step? Because it is part of the process. I do want to introduce Stephen, who's on here and hiding in the webinar room, just because I want to give him a big thank you for uh, facilitating the slide and just backing us for technology needs. So thank you, Stephen. And then I'll introduce the rest of our panelists in just a second. If you'll go on to the next slide, because Stephen's name is the one that you will hear most, is the reason why I wanted y'all to know who's behind that. Within our work, I want you to know too, because there's several things, you say, oh, here's another initiative coming out by the state. Here's another initiative coming out by the state. So I wanted to show the connection here. So at the beginning of all of our PLC webinars, I make sure that I show the connection between high reliability schools and professional learning communities, because they go hand in hand. And the way I look at it is the high reliability schools, it is a framework. It's a school improvement framework. And professional learning communities just fits nicely into the file cabinet of those. It's a 5-drawer framework, with level 1 being safe, supportive, and a collaborative culture. And I just put the casual relationship from the book. And I don't know if many of you have this book. I'm going to try to, oh, now my webinar Spotify stops. Here's the book, the Professional Learning Communities and High Reliability Schools book. And there's a form that just shows the relationship of each level. So level 1, which I consider the bottom filing cabinet, because we know that you have to have that bottom file cabinet filled before you move on up. And you can do some of them at the same time. But if you fill that top drawer, it's going to tip over. So just that's just my analogy for looking at that. But level 1, safe and supportive and collaborative culture. And we'll talk about collaboration throughout the presentation today. But that you have to have that safe and supportive collaborative culture in order to have the students' needs met, the teachers' needs met, and the parents and the guardians have their basic needs met for their children. And once you've done that, then teachers can focus on that instruction and students can focus on learning. Level 2, that's effective teaching in every classroom. So that addresses more of the individual teacher's style, classroom management. The school effectively addresses the leading indicators for effective teaching in every classroom. It's more high quality instruction, making sure that the individual teacher within their classroom. And then you get to level 3, which is a lot of what we're covering today. And that's one of the reasons. That's one of the reasons why it's red. The other one is because we have that black spiral that goes down, and I needed it to go over. So it's a guaranteed and viable curriculum. A school effectively addresses the leading indicators for a guaranteed and viable curriculum. Teachers are clear about their content to teach, and they have adequate time and resources to do it. So they're going to talk about the clarity of essential standards and how that helps with that. Teachers can design a more focused and well-crafted lessons and units, and students have increased opportunities to learn the intended curriculum. So a guaranteed and viable curriculum, it's one of those things, and I think I've said it many times. When I was an elementary and principal, I was the bad one that said, okay, we parent request. So what I'm telling the teachers, the parents at that time, is I'm not offering you a guaranteed and viable curriculum because I'm taking parent requests. So I'm acknowledging the fact that you think one teacher's better than the other, or the rigor's not the same. So this, by addressing this and looking at the essential standards, that's one place where we go, hey, I can guarantee you that no matter which class your child's in, they're going to get the same rigor. And then you move on to level 4, standards reference reporting. And that's basically teachers track the growth and the status of individual students. And you're looking at the standards, how are they performing on the standards? And I think a lot of people have gone to the competency-based, the standards-based reporting. Not everybody, so it's not exactly where the state is right now, but everybody has, there's several who have moved in that standards-based reporting. And then the last one, competency-based education. That's more of students moving at their own pace. When they've shown their proficiency or their competency at that standard, they can move on. So it could be that they move their grade R2 in a year. So again, the state's not at that level, but we do want to offer it for people who are getting to that level. In virtual education, we don't know what it's going to offer us in the future. So that's one to look at. So if you'll move on, I just wanted to do a quick highlight of that. What we have today is we have some of the statewide guiding coalition. It is Arkansas Educators for Arkansas Educators. And I think it's very important that you're hearing from Arkansas educators, because what you're going to hear from Cassie and from Jennifer and from Jana, it doesn't work the same in each school. It is not the same, and that's okay. You make it work for your district. So when you hear from different administrators or different educators throughout the state, what they're doing in their school may not work in your school. You've got to get it to work for your school. But it is a collaborative process, and it's one that we learn from. It's the reason why the book's called Learning by Doing, the one that we base all of our facts on, and you'll see a picture of that book in just a second. But learning by doing is because we learn as we do the work, and it's, again, I will say it's hard work, so don't give up, keep working. Our mission as the statewide guiding coalition is to provide support and guidance for Arkansas educators in developing, leading, and sustaining a statewide professional learning community. Why? Because we know it's the right work, and you see student achievement in that. Our vision is to be a high-functioning collaborative team that plays an integral part in Arkansas leading the nation's student-focused education. And then we have several goals. One of our goals that we're meeting today is implementing and spreading the professional learning communities throughout schools and districts. The 3 that are on here with us today, one comes from cohort 1, one comes from cohort 2, and one comes from cohort 4, the PLC project. And just in case anybody wants to know, cohort 5, we will be accepting applications for that one coming up soon. The letter of intent for that, and that's also on the last slide, it's in a commissioner's memo, is due January the 29th. So if you plan, or you have a campus within your district that plans to apply for the upcoming cohort 5, that letter of intent is due by January the 29th. Once I get that letter of intent, I will start sending out applications in the 1st of February. So I invite all of you to apply for that. We are also building collaborative teacher and administrator teams, supporting the developing and growing of professional learning communities through modeling, observations, on-site, and visiting other schools. So these schools, I'm just going to go out on a limb. I haven't asked them, but I am sure they're okay that if you wanted to come visit their school, of course, in this COVID world, you would probably want to set something up and make sure that everything is approved. But I'm sure that they're okay with you coming, or even Zoom in with some high functioning professional learning teams to just watch them in action. And again, that goes to number 4 too, partnering model schools, PLC schools with other schools. And then we celebrating statewide PLC successes. That is important. One that I probably struggled at more than anything of the PLC process is remembering to celebrate the little things, because what's celebrated, it gets replicated. So celebrate. That's when I need my webinar song of celebration. I'm going to introduce Cassie Adams, and then Jennifer Still will be after. I think Jennifer's next, or Jana. I'm not for sure the order. I think that's the order. But I'm going to turn it over to Cassie, and Cassie is going to start us off. So thank you very much for, oh, and I guess I did put one more slide in there. Here's our agenda just today, and I did put that in the commissioner's memo. There is a recording. It is recorded, and I will put it on the PLC webpage under, or the DESE webpage under the P for Professional Learning Communities. And then if you have any questions, use the Q&A box. I think the chat box is closed, but use the Q&A box. And then they're going to go really in depth with this. So I'm excited to listen to the presentation. So now, Cassie, I'm actually turning it over to you.
Thanks, Missy. All right, guys, good morning. I am Cassie Adams. I'm here in West Memphis, Arkansas at Bragg Elementary. And we took all three of our perspectives as we planned this presentation for you, because as she said earlier, as Missy said, it is different at every campus, but there's still some few pieces that we all have to visit and start with to get there. And so one thing is starting with fundamental assumptions. So every day we know we can wake up and say that almost all educators start each day with honorable intentions, work tirelessly for kids, right? You put your best foot forward every single day. We know we can say that. And we also know that no teacher has all of the skills and time necessary to meet all the diverse needs that are in just one classroom, right? So because of those two assumptions and those pieces of work, that's what follows through the beginning of that PLC process. That's why it's so important for that collaboration piece and the focus. And so on this slide, you'll see is, so why should we ensure that students have access to a guaranteed and viable curriculum? Well, two parts to this why, and it goes over the next few slides, but two-part right here, two pieces, is that collaborative teams in this process, they use those 4 critical guiding questions. But the one that focuses on the curriculum, the guaranteed and viable curriculum, the essential standards, is question 1. So the why would we do this? It's because we need to lay out what do we want our students to learn. You have to start there in that process, that conversational piece. And so when teams, and this is teacher teams, right? When teacher teams engage in answering this first question, the result is just a better understanding of the standards they teach. And as we go through this and as you hear the pieces, I myself, we're out of the pilot. We're kind of in our sustainability year, but we learn every single year that we sit down as teams and look at these standards. It's different for everyone every single year because you learn more. And so you better understand, you're more prepared. All right, next slide. Okay, so what are essential standards? And this is, of the PLC process, one thing that took us a minute to catch on to when we did the work is that you don't do this process for every single thing. The PLC process is just 4 essential standards. So essential standards are the identified knowledge and skills that students have to get out of that class for that year, for that time. It's what teachers will spend the majority of instructional time teaching. Essential standards are what teachers will assess. It's what you will have data-driven discussions about, and it's what teachers intervene on, whether that be extension or intervention. Those are what essential standards are. Okay, next slide. So here, why essential standards? How do we focus on the learning? Again, those are those 4 questions that we talked about. And if you see the arrows pointing to what do we want students to learn? That question, that step of that process leads you into the work of identifying your essential standards. So why do we even have essential standards? If we are to ensure high levels of learning for all students, you have to answer this question. And the goal of our schools is to do just that, right? Next slide. Okay, this is where Jennifer takes over.
Hi everyone, I'm Jennifer Steele. I'm an assistant principal at Northside High School in Fort Smith, and we're part of PLC Cohort 4. So we're just getting started this year, and we are learning a tremendous amount through being a part of the cohort. We've talked just for a couple of times about the 4 questions of a PLC, and I remember about 6 years ago when I went to my first PLC Institute that Mike Mattos and both Rick DeFore said you cannot answer these questions out of order. They must be answered in order. And so that's why we start with question number 1, and that is, what is it that we want our students to learn? So responding to this question is the first step in ensuring that all students will learn at high levels. And responding to this question and identifying the essential standards shifts the conversation from an emphasis on teaching to an emphasis on learning, which is all about the PLC process. Next slide, please. So the important thing in identifying the essential standards is ensuring that the teams are actually doing the work. No one else is doing the work. So why is that so important? The first thing is collaborative study of the essential learning promotes clarity. So dialogue, clarifying what standards mean and what they look like in the classroom helps promote a more consistent curriculum. The second thing is collaborative study of essential learning promotes consistent priorities. Just because teachers interpret a learning standard consistently doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to assign the same priority to that standard. One teacher may feel like that is a very important standard. They're very passionate about that and devote weeks to that, while another may choose to spend only a day on that standard. So having that collaborative of study helps to establish the priority of those standards. Next slide, please. And the third one is collaborative study of essential learning is crucial to the common pacing required for answering that question number 2, which is how will we know if they learned it? And that is where the common formative assessments come in. So if teachers have not agreed on the meaning and significance of what they're being asked to teach, they won't be able to establish common pacing, which is a prerequisite for common formative assessments. And 4, collaborative study of essential learning can help establish a curriculum that is viable. And that was mentioned earlier by Missy. One barrier is curriculum overload. Instead of making decisions on what to omit in classrooms, teams can establish a curriculum that can be taught in the allotted time, and they can clarify the scope and sequence of the curriculum with colleagues who teach in the preceding and subsequent courses and grade levels. Next slide, please. And the last one is it creates ownership of the curriculum among those who are called to teach it. And that is very important. Ownership and commitment are directly linked to the extent to which people are engaged in the decision-making process. Without involvement, there is no commitment. And in the book that Missy mentioned, Learning by Doing, there's a quote in there that says, schools are most effective when the question, what is it that we want our students to learn, is addressed in a systematic way by the professionals most responsible for ensuring the learning, and that's the classroom teachers. Next slide. And I'm going to turn it over to Jana.
Hi everyone, I'm Jana Wilson and I am the principal at Blytheville Primary, and I'm excited to join you today. So I am in cohort, my school is in cohort 2, so we are in our last year of the grant and moving into sustainability. So how do we do this? So we started this process 3 years ago. And so thinking back was kind of like, okay, what have we done? I mean, 3 years ago was a long time ago. But how did we do it? Where do we come from? So one of the things you first have to think about is essential standards. These are the things that are the most important. Like we have to focus our instruction on these things. Our kids cannot leave this grade or this class without knowing these things. So you're going to sort your standards because there's just too many standards. There is no way to devote the time and effort we need into each standard and be able to teach them in a whole year. It's not possible. So you are going to divide your standards into essential and supporting. And we called these in our school our need to know versus our good to know. And so you'll see that in different schools is that the terminology might be slightly different in what they're calling them, but they really are your essential standards versus the ones that are going to support the essential. So one of our PLC coaches told us this, and I can't remember, I didn't write down who said it, but it has really stuck with me as we've gone, is prioritizing as a group is hard. Your job isn't to be right. It is to be working on being consistent as a team, being true to your collective commitments. And in some of the earlier webinars, you've learned about your collective commitments as being one of those foundations that you have to be a true professional learning community. You've got to stick to those collective commitments. And one of our collective commitments is that we will agree upon our essential standards as a team, and we will stick to those. And so it wasn't easy. It was hard. And it's not about, well, you're right and I'm wrong. It's that as a team, we're going to be consistent in what we do. We go to the next slide, please. All right, so how do you do it? Like, how do you decide that this one's essential and this one's not? And, because I have one teacher's like, this one's the most important, and one, no, this one's more important than that one. We've got to have this one before we have that one. There are criteria to help you along the way. And so you're going to ask yourself, is this standard real? And in real, there are 4 things you're going to look at. One of those is the R for readiness. Does the standard prepare students for success at the next level? So you're going to be thinking as a team, is this standard been identified as essential prerequisite skill in the next course or grade level? So this is going to require teams to talk to each other too. So you're going to have to talk as a team, and then you're going to have to talk to the people above you, below you. And I think about that because I'm in a K2 building in mine. So, I got to think about, preschool all the way up to 3rd grade when we're thinking about our essential standards. So depending on what grade levels, or if you're in a high school, what courses you are, you have to think beyond just your grade or your class. But you also have to think, is it a prerequisite skill for the next year in 2nd grade? So is it something they have to know that to be successful in that next grade? So is it readiness? That's one of the criteria that we look at to determine if it's essential. The second one is E for endurance. So are students expected to retain this knowledge and skill beyond the unit and course that they're in? Is it useful beyond a single test, beyond a single unit in that grade level? So it's not just beyond their grade, but within that grade, are they going to use that skill in multiple units that you're teaching? Then once you know, is it a readiness? Does it have endurance? The next thing you think about is it assessed? So as much as we don't like to think about these things, we do have to think about, will this standard prepare students for success on high stakes external exams? I mean, we have to think about that ACT Aspire, the ACT, and if you're in high school, will it help them? And it's beyond that. If you're in high school, will it help them on occupational competency exams as well? So you have to think about, how is that standard going to help them outside of that? Is it a concept students will encounter on end of year state standardized assessment? So these are questions you have to ask as a team in order to know if that's going to be essential. And so this really hit us hard in 2nd grade, because we were thinking about, okay, as 2nd graders, our kids are going to leave our building and they're going to go, in my district, the next school is 3rd through 5th. So they're going to go to 3rd grade. They're going to take the ACT Aspire. So are the essentials that we are choosing, are they going to help them be successful on the ACT Aspire assessment? That is one of the things that we looked at when we were choosing essential standards in that grade. And then the last thing you ask yourself in is it real is leverage. Does this standard have leverage? Will they be able to apply it in more than one subject area? Will they be able to apply it? So an example in informational reading in social studies or in science. So can they apply it outside that small place that you are teaching them? So the 4 things you're going to talk about is readiness, endurance, is it assessed, and does it have leverage? So these are the things that you're going to look for. And we have a poster, and I'm going to show you, you'll see a picture of it here, that is still hanging up in our collaboration room, that when we still look at our essential standards, we still look at these 4 things to determine, is it still essential? We go to the next slide, please. All right, so now, okay, now I know what the criteria, what's the protocol? How do I do that? So here is a way to really help break it down step by step. The first step is you're going to have your individual teachers decide themselves. They need to reflect on your standards. So just having a copy of their standards and individually giving them time before they meet to reflect on which of these are essential based on the 4 criteria we just talked about and which of them are not. So they already have in their head before that meeting, okay, these are the ones I say are essential and these are the ones I say are supporting. So give them time before you meet together to look at that so they have an idea to wrap their heads around and they're ready to discuss it with their team. Then you bring your teams together and you reach consensus on those. And in a minute, I'll show you how we did that. And then once your teams have consensus, all right, now you've got to talk about alignment. All right, and then you're going to have to write these down somewhere. Like everyone's got to know, so you got to have a format of how are you going to record which is essential and which is supporting. And we started with chart paper and markers because we are totally elementary. And so we have things cut apart. We have tape. There's, pretty markers that we use. And then we did put it into an electronic version as well, but totally started with chart paper and markers. And then we look for gaps. So this is where that alignment, that vertical alignment is going to come into play, because you have to see. So in my building, we had to make sure our kindergarten, our first, and our second grade were actually aligned. That first grade didn't have a missing piece. Like kindergarten and second grade said this standard was essential, but then first grade was like, yep, nope, that's not essential. Oh, we're going to have a big gap there. So we have to look and see, did our standards, do they have vertical alignment through the grades? And so that's going to require that that teams work together with outside teams as they go. All right, we go to the next slide, please. All right, so here you see pictures of what this looks like in action. So you see one of my second grade teams here, and we totally did. We cut up the standards, and you can see the little pieces of paper, and we labeled them. We had supporting and we had essential. Like, we need to know these. These are just great to know. And this is us actually having a discussion in second grade of, is this standard actually supporting or is it essential? And you can see the chart that we still have hanging to this day, even 3 years later, in our collaboration room of what we did. But we totally cut these apart. And when we're having this discussion, one of the things you need to think about is that it's not about your opinion or your preference. It's not about, well, I really like teaching about dinosaurs, and by golly, we're going to do the standards that help me teach that unit because I really like teaching that. That's not what this is about. This is what is going to prepare our students for success. And so it's not about your opinion or what you like to teach. And that was something that some of the, teachers are going to have to get over. It's what is going to help our students be successful. And if I don't feel comfortable teaching that, that's why I have a team that's going to help me get there. And so it's making sure, as we talked about, as Missy talked about earlier, is that there's no more teacher lottery, because the kids are going to get the same level of rigor in every class because we're teaching the same essential standards. We all have agreed upon these. Will you go to the next slide, please? All right, so then from that chart paper, so we get it all on chart paper, we've done it. That first year, we started putting them into a Google Doc. Every one of my grade level teams has their own drive. So I have a kindergarten team drive, a first grade team drive, and a second grade team drive. And one of the documents in those drives is this essential document. We have it for math and we have it for literacy. Now, let me be clear. The first time we did this, my teachers teach everything because, they're self-contained in their room. They teach everything. We could not tackle literacy, math, science. So we could not tackle all of that. That is not possible. It was too much to tackle at one time. So our very first year, the only thing we tackled in essential standards was literacy. That was the grade levels that we had math, we had literacy. I had them decide, and they said literacy, that was the most important thing they wanted to get better at teaching. So that's what we focused on. And honestly, we focused on it for our first 2 years, is really determining what was essential in literacy. We just didn't do this one time either. So what you see in front of you right now is actually a culmination of 3 years of we're determining what's essential and what's not. We've done this 3 different times. So we did it the first year, and we had a lot more essential standards that first year than we have now. When we came back the second year, we realized that we identified too many as essential, because there's no way to intervene on every standard that we identified. If we can't intervene on it, it's not essential. We have to, the ones that we determine are essential, we have to intervene on those, because what we're saying is we're guaranteeing you that your kid is going to learn this, and they're not going to leave me until they learn it. So I'm going to do every intervention possible if they didn't get it the first time that we taught it. Because you are moving from teaching to learning. Your focus is completely shifting from I taught it, if you got it, you got it. If you didn't, you didn't. That's not my fault. I taught it. We're focusing now on, did they learn it? And if they didn't, then what am I going to do to intervene? Well, I can't intervene on every standard. So that's where your essential standards really come into play, is I'm going to intervene on those standards. So these are the ones that our team has decided are most important. We're going to intervene until they get it. And it might take them all year to master it, but we're not going to stop intervening until they actually get there. But you've got to get started. You've got to get started to get better. So you've got to start somewhere. So the first year we identified them, you know, it was the first time ever doing it. We gave it our best shot, what we knew and how we did it. We learned that year. So the second year we come back and they're like, whoa, there was too many. We can't assess over all those. We can't intervene on all of those. We've got to redo it again. So the second year we pared them down some more. And then COVID hit. So yay for that. So this year we have even pared them down more. Which ones are really the most important? Like, it has really laser focused us on what is super important for our kids to learn before they leave us. Because, you know, in and out of school, kids are in and out of school with, you know, being close contacts and quarantine. So with the time, the limited time you have with them, what are the most important? So we pared those back again. So it is a continuous process, and some of them change. Some of them we thought were essential, then we're like, nope, those are going to be supporting. And then some of those have come back to being essential. So it is never something that you just check off your list and you're done. That's why we like having them in Google Docs, because we can move them between the essential to the supporting, from the supporting to the essential as we learn and our teams get better. So we do have a Google Doc, and this, you can see it's just a chart, and it says essential and it says supporting. And you can see on the essential standards, the standards is actually in blue because that's a link you can click, and it'll take you to the breakdown of that standard, which you will learn about in the next webinar that we do, is how to take that standard and break it down into learning targets and stuff. But we made sure that if you look at that standard, you can click on it and get to that breakdown as well. Will you go to the next slide, please? But this is all talking about grade levels or specific courses. But in my building, specifically, we didn't want to leave out our special areas. We're talking art, music, our counselor, our librarian, our certified interventionists. So the second year, I did some PD with them, specifically around essential standards themselves, and they divided their standards up into essential and supporting as well. So art, music, PE can do it just as well. Now in my school, I only have one art teacher, one music teacher, one librarian, you know, but they decided to work as a team together when we learned about it. And then you can see them, they're all sitting on the floor as that's my librarian sitting on the floor. Was my counselor at the time, and he was dividing his. So they're not left out of the process either. So it is not just my grade level teams that are working on this. It is my special areas as well. Even, I didn't see a picture of this, but my speech pathologists were in this group as well. And so what we did with them and our certified interventionists is they looked at the essential standards that the grade levels chose, and they're like, okay, how can I support what they chose as essential? So my speech teacher and my certified interventionist, how can they support? That's what they're looking at. They're looking at, okay, this is what they said it was essential. Here's how I can help in that area. And I have a wonderful speech pathologist, and she has taken this and run with it to make sure when she's doing her therapy, she's also hitting those essential standards as well. So it's just not essential for the classroom teacher, it's essential for everyone in that building. If they know, how can the art teacher, he has done a great job of trying to help them as well. He knows what's essential as well, because everyone has access to those documents. So he can look and see how he can support during his class as well. If you'll go to the next slide, please. All right, and I'm going to turn it back over to Jennifer.
Okay, thank you, Jana. So what are some tips moving forward? And she mentioned this, remember that less is more when you're selecting these standards. You want to hone in on just several that you feel like are essential. There's no exact guideline. That's a guideline, but it's not a sacred number. And like she said, the more you do the process, the more you may even trim that number of essential standards down. The second thing is you got to focus on the proficiency and the key skills. The idea is to go deep and not just broad in these. You want to remember that these are critical skills that students must learn to be successful moving forward in their course or their grade, to get to be successful even in the next course. She mentioned also that they had kind of drilled down even more so with COVID. Our literacy specialist, Angela Perry, that was the first thing she said to us this year, is you've got to prioritize the priority standards in a year like the year that we are experiencing right now. So beware of any action that removes the team aspect out of selecting these standards. It's critical that those that are actually doing the work are the ones making the decisions regarding the essential skills and standards. What would some of these detours maybe look like where the team does not have that kind of input is one, just giving them the district or state guidelines and letting that be a substitute for the team dialogue. Another is where you assign a committee of teachers to establish the curriculum and then they present it to the rest of their colleagues. That is not going to create ownership within that particular team. Another detour to actually getting this work done in an effective way is purchasing a curriculum. All of these things can be used as resources, but it does not need to be what determines your essential standards. Stephen Covey says, without involvement, there is no commitment. So mark it down, asterisk it, circle it, underline it. No involvement, no commitment. And that is what I think all three of us have experienced in our schools, is that the team that's doing the work is the one that has to be the one making the decisions in determining what is essential for students to learn at their school with their students. So I'm going to turn it over, I believe, to Cassie.
Okay, next slide, please. So here we have resources written down, or pictures of the resources, and all of us can attest to how much we use these books, you guys. And I promise you, it doesn't matter if you're in year 1, year 4, I go back to these tools all the time. And some of them are new as they come out and we adopt them. So I want to start with learning by doing and the frequently asked questions. So learning by doing is an overview of the process, and it is so crucial to read. But the frequently asked questions is so beneficial in a different light, because it goes through and it's like, well, why should teachers have to do all this? Why can't they use this? It justifies all of those reasons to setting the importance of the why, and Make It Happen, the best book in the world. Love Make It Happen. This book, for any person, whether it be you as an administrator, a curriculum coordinator, a coach at your campus, it literally takes you step by step through that process to support your teacher teams and what to do. It tells you what tool to use, what conversations to hold. It is amazing. It is an amazing resource. Big Book of Tools. This is another one. And these books are not resources just for essential standards. We use them for this, absolutely, but they hit a lot of other topics as well, as you'll hear in the upcoming webinars. But the Big Book of Tools, I actually have that over on my table, like tabbed like crazy right now, because I'm using it with my guiding coalition right now. School Improvement for All, What About Us? These books were basically the resources, and through our work, past our work, and what we presented to you guys today. So we wanted to make sure to share those with y'all. Okay, next slide. Okay, so here it kind of goes back. I know we've all mentioned it, Missy, from the very beginning, and the girls have mentioned it otherwise. This is the end question that we try to ask ourselves on our teams, and it's, can you make every parent this promise? It does not matter which teacher your child has at our school. Your child will receive the highest quality instruction, the best assessment practices, and extra time and support to learn at high levels. That is the end goal. Next slide.
Okay, so we have hit a lot of information very quickly about essential standards in this. And so now it's time for you to reflect. Some of you are watching this on your own in your district. Some of you are watching this with others with you. But as a team or individually, you really need to stop and reflect. And this is one way that one of my PLC coaches introduced to us to reflect. And it's called Amen, Aha, and So What? So for the amen, I want you to list or think about, okay, out of everything I learned today, we're doing this part. Like, we have this part because there's something in there that you are doing. So what is it that you're already doing? Get that jotted down so you know, okay, this is our starting point. And then the aha is, all right, so what you've learned today, there's a new idea. What was new for me or for our team as we watch this? And then the last thing you're going to write down is the so what. All right, so this is what we're already doing. This is what we learned that is new. All right, great. So what? What are your next steps? What are you going to do next? Where are you? Because every school is going to be in a different place. And even if you've been part of the PLC process before, or you've started it and you've stopped it again, so stop and say, okay, what are our next steps? We've got to do something with this. So learning is great, but if you don't do anything with it, it doesn't matter. So as an individual or as a team, what are you going to do next? So, and this is just a great reflection tool that you can use with your teachers or your schools as well too. So, but I really want you to think about essential standards. What are your next steps? It could be, you know what, we haven't even started this conversation yet, so we need to get started. So maybe we need to get our learning by doing book out, and like Cassie said, you know, it's all tabbed up, no lies here. Like, it's tabbed up, I got it highlighted, notes written on. So in learning by doing, one of our next steps could be that as a team, we're going to have to read about this essential standard thing and come to some common knowledge as a team of what that means, because they probably weren't here with you listening to this presentation, so they're going to need some learning first. What are essential standards? This is the book you start with. This is it. Like, this is the book. You've got to start here. So that could be your step. Or, okay, we know what essential standards are. Our next step could be that now we've actually got to do it. Let's get our teams involved and let's talk about what's our essential standard, because as the ladies have said multiple times, is the team has to have that discussion. If they're just handed a set of essential standards, because I had teachers that said, didn't some school already do this? Like, why do we have to do this ourselves? Like, can't we just take theirs? No, we can't take theirs, because we have learned so much about our standards by having the discussion about what's essential and not. Because as we have that discussion, we actually talk about that standard and realize, oh, you think it means this, but I think it means this. And so now we're more on the same page. That discussion, that's what's important. Because once the teachers know more and they feel better about the standards, they can teach better and our kids learn more. That is why it's so important for the teams to do this work. So think about, what are you going to do next with that information? All right, next slide. I guess it's back to Missy.
Okay, I'm going to start bringing up. So I want to, I'm going to put you on the spot because we have about 15 minutes for questions and answers. But I've had several people who've asked questions, and I want to hear how you're doing it at your site before we get into. I'm going to leave this slide up, or Stephen, if you'll leave it up, just so that they can get the contact information, and then I'll go through some of the dates and what that means. But I don't know if any of y'all said it, but K-12, and I don't know who says this, but I've heard it in several of our PLC institutes or things, or from coaches. If you were to teach every standard, it would take you 22 years. Therefore, you have to determine essential standards. So Jana, you talked about the activity that y'all did where you cut up your essential standards and you labeled them and you grouped them by what we think is essential and supporting standards. Were there any other activities that anybody else used in order to determine what was essential that you did with your staff?
Well, one thing that we currently had to do with the gap that we encountered with COVID and closure, we very much started the same way that Jana's school started, with cutting up and moving, because we're elementary, chart paper, all that good stuff. But you have to go back and revisit even the grade below before, because some of those skills were essential for the grade level above. And so that conversation is so pertinent even now, using data to drive those conversations of essential standards. Because if you see a trend in data where your school, where your kiddos are scoring, really struggling with a skill, it might need to be essential for your campus, which is why we don't necessarily share our essential standards, because it might not be essential for the next one. So in those data talks and those data discussions, looking at performance, that also plays into that conversation. And I'm talking about currently right now with our gap, because some of our foundational reading skills that we use for kindergarten are in our first and second grade classrooms as well. And so I think that I'm going back to say not necessarily a step, but conversation, because you have to constantly, this is a process. It is a cycle. We have been through the coaching. Our coaches sadly are not with us anymore. And so now it's up to us to figure out what that looks like for our school without a coach. And so we go back to that book, like she said, learning by doing, take those teams back there, because the process, there's not a specific way. There's not a right way. I guess I should say there's not a right way as long as it follows those criteria.
Deal. Jennifer, what did y'all do on the high school campuses determining your essential standards?
Much of that was done a few years ago, and a lot of it was what essential skills are students going to need to be successful in the next course of study, whether that would be moving from 10th grade English to an AP course in 11th grade, an AP English course, or just English on level for grade 11. And so we did that, and what essential skills would students need to be successful after graduation, upon graduation. That's how those conversations started. Now we are actually in year one of the cohort, but we started this process, and as the ladies have mentioned, we're refining it now as we're learning more about how to drill that down. But that's the way we began that process.
So when we started it, I started with cohort 1 the same year Cassie did. And when we started it, one of the things that we did was a T-chart. And we had the teachers on the right-hand side of that T-chart on the big chart paper write their essential standards on the right side. And then we had the previous grade come through and say what is required, or I don't know, I just got that. Okay, so they're writing on the right-hand side, or no, the right-hand side is where they're writing what does the student have to know before they come to us. And then we put those T-charts up together. So if third grade says on the right, these are our essential standards, then fourth grade should say on theirs, they need to know this. So third grade's looking at their essential standards and comparing to do that vertical alignment. So that's one of the ways that we started. Just trying to throw out some different activities for everyone. We do have a couple questions. I want to make sure that I get to their questions before I get back to mine. When did new teachers, new to the profession or new to the district school, become a part of the conversation on what's essential? Do they receive the documents, teach, and then share their thoughts?
Well, I can tell you what we've done in our district, or my school. So each year, I start the year off with some PD that is special just for my new teachers, where we go over the PLC process because they're new and they're kind of just being thrown into it. So we go over the learning that they have missed, and we introduce essential standards, what they are, what their grade level has chosen. And we talk about, why was it essential? Because I was there for those conversations. So for most of them, I can say, what they were talking about. And my instructional facilitators and my assistant principal help with that as well. And so we go over that. And then throughout the years, they're teaching those. We continually have those discussions as a team, because when they're coming together and they're talking about, all right, here's our next unit, here's what we've decided was essential last year, are we still in agreement? This is what is essential. Do we need to make any changes? Or at the end, after we've given our end of unit assessment, we're talking about those essential again. So they get to talk about it throughout the year. It is never a one and done thing. But I always start the year off with new teacher PD so that they have at least some foundational knowledge, and we build that as we go through the year.
At Northside, our new teachers are actually immersed in that collaborative process. We start with our collaborative teams on week 1, and that continuous conversation that Jana was alluding to, they are involved on that from the get-go. One of the things that we have started this year is making sure that we're also immersing those new teachers into the mission, vision, and collective commitments, because that's really what we base all of our work on. is those collective commitments, what we believe kids can do, and how we are going to behave every day in regards to student achievement. And so we have started making sure that we provide professional development for those teachers on how we came to develop our guiding coalition, how our guiding coalition came up with those things, and how that guides our everyday work. We feel like that's very important that they understand how we came to believe those things.
Another piece of that too is why it's so important for a coach or a district coordinator or an administrator to also have that background knowledge of this process and all that, is to coach them through that process, because you might turn into a situation where you have turnover and have a brand new team on a grade level. And so you also have to guide that balance of conversation with the expertise of your knowledge, or that person's knowledge. And that's like Make It Happen, that book. It provides that coaching standpoint where the teachers are still doing the work, but you get to sit back and coach that work. And that's so important. And so at my school, we do the same. I put together PD based off of the way we do things here at Bragg, and I immerse them in that right before school starts. And they're part of that conversation the whole year. And some of my new teachers, one of them this year was like, I don't know what to say is essential yet. I don't know. That's okay. That's absolutely okay. But you are going to look at that unpacked standard and learn what it means. And next year, by goodness, you will be able to contribute to that conversation. And so some of that is just the learning process for a new teacher. They have to sit and listen and immerse themselves, but they have to have those opportunities to do so. So they have to have that time carved out and those pieces that provide teams with that structure to have those conversations and do the work.
And I would like to add, because one of the part is, do they receive the documents, teach, and then share their stuff? So as soon as we get a new teacher, they're automatically added to the drive. And during that PD, we go over how to access your drive. Where do you find the essential standards? Where do you find the breakdown of the standards? And where do you find your unit plans? So they have access to all those documents up front. So over the summer that they can start kind of wading through and see what's going on, so they can come with some questions and they can ask, some of them are, they're brand new, so they're too scared to ask a question, but we try to anticipate what questions that they might have when we go over that PD, but we make sure they have immediate access to those documents so they could get started on that process as well.
One of the things too, I think, is a commitment from the state is each one of the project schools, when they start at the very beginning, the first year, they have a PLC overview, which is pretty much making sure that everybody is sharing the same vernacular. I mean, we understand when we talk about essential standards, what does that mean? So one of the things that I think that I'm going to commit to, I guess right now, is during the summer or right before school starts, is having one of those PLC overviews for everybody in the state, just to make sure that everybody is, when we're talking about something, that we're sharing the same vocabulary. So it'll be a virtual session, and it will be for not only for the project schools, and when they have new staff, that they can always say, hey, during the summer, there's going to be this PLC overview that I need you to attend to make sure that we're all sharing the same vocabulary. But for any other school across the state, because I do know that there are other schools who are going through this process. So that is a commitment I'm making right here, and it's recorded. So I hope that answered your question, Jessica. The next question, Jennifer, I think it's going to be more for you. At high school, did you bring your 9-12 content teachers together as a team, since often there is only one teacher at each grade level in smaller schools? So what do you do about the, and all of you could probably add to this, what happens with singletons?
We're a pretty large high school, so we have at least 3 to 4 in every content area, so they are able to collaborate. Where we do struggle a bit is with the singletons that you mentioned, particularly AP. There may be one AP psychology teacher, one AP chem teacher, and they often will collaborate with our sister school across town, or in some other organizations they are involved in, and get input from there on what their essential skills would be. So we at least try to be working across town with those teachers that are teaching at another school or within state organizations. The other thing for some electives is that they are actually work with some of the essential skills required to help us meet our SMART goals, which is one of the things that we've been working on as part of the year 1 of the cohort, and focusing on some of those literacy skills that we have as our SMART goals, and then finding standards that are common in and skills common in different areas. For example, we teach CPR here as part of the graduation requirement. Our JROTC, our FACS classes, and our sports med all do that. So they do collaborate on what skills they feel are essential to that, and they analyze the data for that together.
And I'm just going to add too, again, on this, something that we're working on is setting up some statewide collaborative teams for singletons. When you have, a smaller school that has 1 6th grade teacher, how can they join a collaborative team within the state in order to do those same things? So we're working on that. Okay, there are a couple more things that I wanted to make sure that I brought attention to. One, so in your professional learning community, in your collaborative teacher team meetings, did I hear you say you're only really working on your essential standards? On your process, within your process?
We are here at Northside, yes.
And I think I heard someone else say that too. So that's kind of that overwhelmness that I want people to hear, to make sure that, there are a ton of standards, but when you come together in your collaborative teacher team meetings, you're focusing on those essential standards. And I think Janice said something about the intervention, you're intervening on that. That's your tier 2 intervention. Your tier 1 intervention happens within the classroom and your instruction on the supporting standards and essential. But when you go to your tier 2 intervention, that's on your grade level standard that is considered essential.
I think that too will play, the next webinar that follows this will support this so much so, because the essential standards drive everything. They drive everything. And so once those are selected, that drives your assessment process, that drives your intervention extension program at your school, that drives your collaborative team time. It drives everything. So, and it takes a long time. You guys, it took us 2 years to get literacy essentials for our 3rd through 6th grades. It's not something, and that's the part that I wish I would have known back in the beginning, because it is so overwhelming. It's so scary. It really is. You just have to jump in almost, because it doesn't have to be done in 1 week. It doesn't have to be done, but you could start those conversations now and gear your summer PD towards that. Maybe use, if you have any Title I funds or any kind of creative funding, to bring in somebody to help you with that coaching even. And so just so you can make a plan for what you want. But the next pieces lie underneath that essential standard. So that is the work. That was where our focus was that first year for math and literacy, and it kind of rolled over into year 2, but also learning how to work together as a team alongside doing that work, because you have to constructively teach your teams how to work together. Because it's new, it's a new way of thinking, and your thought process changes from August to January, you as an individual. So, your teachers go through that avenue as well. So supporting them, again, with the platform and teaching them how to work together as a team is just as beneficial as diving into the work with the essentials as well.
Yeah, and I want to add one thing I forgot to mention earlier when we were talking about how we did this. So in my school, I have too many teachers to have them give them all the same. So I'm talking like my kindergarten team. During the school day, they're divided into 2 separate teams, because I just have too many to be able for them to meet all at the same time, because I don't have that many specials teachers. So when we started this process, what we actually did is we were doing it during the day, during their collaboration. So once or twice a week, we were meeting as a team, and that smaller team of that larger team, they would come up, okay, here's our essential, here is our supporting standards. And then the other team would meet the next hour, and here's our essential, and here's our supporting. And then when we would meet after school as a whole team, and then each team would bring that together, And then all we had to talk about as a whole team are the ones that they had different. Like one team might have said it was essential, one team might have said that it was supporting. So we'd only talk about those as a whole team. And honestly, they did a really good job of coming to a consensus without actually being together. So there were just a few standards we had to talk about as a team that they put in different places. And so that was one aspect of that as well. So if you're like, I can't get all my teachers together at once during the day, like that's okay. I can't either. I still can't do that in most of my grade levels. So they have 2 separate collaboration times during the day, and then we meet after school as well. And so our after school meeting is where they have those team whole grade level discussions as well. So it's okay if you can't do it. You can break it down in different ways so that it works for you.
Okay, there were a couple other things that I wanted to bring attention to that you all mentioned. I wrote down several questions just because I know that I've received several questions. So I just wanted you to be able to cover it, but I think y'all have covered all of them. One, I did want to say the essential standards, just your, somebody talked about their speech or goals or their special teachers looking at those standards and making decisions based on those standards, which is a concept that, when you're looking at your IEPs and setting those IEP goals, looking at your essential standards and basing your IEP goals. So you brought that to everyone's attention, and I appreciate that. Another thing that I hear often, and I think from, you've already covered this too, but I just want to say it, is why hasn't the state decided on essential standards for everyone? And my answer is to that is, oh, I hope we don't. That should be something that should be done within a collaborative teacher team, not with the state level. So I wanted you've already addressed that because, and that's something I hear too at the district level, with the district's already given us our essential. So, and that does happen, and there is a process for that to happen. Just make sure that if you're doing it at the district level, that you have the ownership and the buy-in from all campuses and from all content areas, and that it is decided and that campus level has some of that decision making, because then it becomes the district's piece. And I love that quote, Jennifer, I think from Stephen Covey, the one that you said about everybody working with and having the ownership or buy-in with that, the commitment to it. I believe it's on commitment. That's where that commitment happens. So if you're handing someone, they don't have that commitment. So anyway, just think about that, and a little nugget to leave on. So I don't have any other questions in the Q&A. I did have a couple of people who asked when is the next webinar, and that's February the 11th. And that will go out probably the first week in February for you to register for those. So just make sure that you can register through that and get on there. And then the last thing is just some dates. I've already mentioned the cohort 4 letter of intent is due by January 29th. That's this Friday. If you want to see past webinars, now we have just converted over to a new website. So some of those webinars did not convert with it. So I will work on getting those uploaded. But if you want to see past webinars or this webinar for the future, or share it with your staff, it is on this website for PLC. We do have this week too, at the beginning, I talked about the HRS, and we have several schools that are working on their certification for level 1 for HRS, and even some that are working on their level 2 certification with Marzano. But we do have a BYOD, and that's bring your own data for January 29th. That is virtual, and you can register for that through ESC. And the first part of the morning is you've got someone, and a Marzano associate, who's doing a level 1, 2, and 3 overview. And then that afternoon, you bring your survey results, and she helps you looking at the indicators and what evidence do you already have in place for those indicators, and what evidence do you need in order to get to that level. So that's January the 28th with Dr. Shelley Geese from Marzano. And again, you can find that registration on the ESC. And then the last thing, Live Stream PLC Institute. This year, Fort Smith is hosting that. Fort Smith has 3 model schools, Northside being one of them, Northside High School, and then Spradlin and Baldwin. So they've chosen those throughout the United States based on model schools. So you can go onto the Solution Tree website and see where else they're offering it. But Fort Smith is offering it June 2nd through the 4th. You can use your ESSER funds, or you can use your any of your PD funds to purchase a flat and live stream a flat PD amount for that. And you can live stream that in your district, and you have access to all of the keynote and all of the breakout sessions, and then you can host it in your campus for that, if that's something that you want to do. However, they will physically be on the Fort Smith campus. Now, I don't know that Fort Smith is taking any physical registrations outside of their district. Jennifer, do you know the answer to that?
I do not know the answer. I've just received communication about what our teachers will need to do to get signed up for that.
Okay. Yeah. So anyway, it's another opportunity as a reaction or something to COVID. So anyway, just wanted to put that out there. And you can go to Solution Tree and look at that and see what all dates it's offered in all time zones and all dates. I want to thank y'all a whole lot for doing this, because I think it's very important for everyone to hear from you and what's going on within your districts. And I left this slide up for you to have their information, to take a picture or whatever, long enough that you could be able to write it all down. So reach out to them, and I know that they will be very open to answer your questions and help guide you through the process. And I as well will be open to help. So just reach out to me if you have any questions, or I can connect you with the district. So thank y'all. We're gonna stay on here for just a minute. But we are done, and I appreciate everybody joining us.